July 16, 1945. The atomic age dawned over the high desert of New Mexico. For just over 3.5 years, teams of scientists, designers, soldiers, and factory workers had struggled to solve the most complex engineering problem in human history. The boiling fireball rising through the morning mists near Socorro, New Mexico, proved they had definitively succeeded. And still, the job was only half done. A weapon undelivered is no weapon at all. Now airmen stationed half a world away must take up this torch and bear it directly to the enemy's homeland. The development of America's atomic bomb begins in 1939. An émigré Hungarian physicist named Leo Szilard learns that German scientists have discovered how to split the uranium atom. Splitting uranium atoms might create a chain reaction, releasing 1 million times more energy than an equal amount of high explosives. Szilard is Jewish. He fled Germany following Hitler's rise to chancellor. Fearing that the Nazis have a head start on the development of the atomic weapons, Szilard persuades his friend Albert Einstein to co-sign a letter to President Roosevelt imploring him to begin atomic weapons research in earnest. To this point, government nuclear research has received the grand sum of $2,000. But Roosevelt is impressed by Einstein and Szilard's plea and orders an aide to take action. Research begins at various military and university labs, but it lacks coordination and sufficient funding, and 2 years go by with little progress. Soon, however, intelligence reports begin to trickle in showing that the Germans are making progress on atomic weapons research at the Norsk hydro plant and elsewhere. Finally, Roosevelt receives a British report that a practical bomb can be developed before war's end. The president orders an all-out effort to create the A-bomb. Roosevelt's top scientific advisor, Vannevar Bush, announces the green light to the physicists who will conduct the research on December 6, 1941.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor galvanizes the War Department's budding atomic research program. The effort is assigned to the Army Corps of Engineers Manhattan District in New York City, giving the new Manhattan Project its name. The Corps assigns one of its most can-do officers to head up the program, Colonel Leslie Richard Groves. Groves gets the job on the strength of his success managing another gigantic engineering challenge, the 18-month crash program to erect the War Department's new Pentagon-shaped headquarters. Bucking for a promotion, Groves is eager for a European battle command. Instead, he's ordered to shepherd a bunch of eggheads pursuing a pipe dream. But he gets the promotion anyway, to Brigadier General. General Groves combs the universities looking for a physicist to head up the scientific arm of the Manhattan Project. He selects Julius Robert Oppenheimer, a brilliant theoretical physicist then teaching at Berkeley. Oppenheimer and Groves could not be more different. Of the general, one admirer remarks, "Most impressive ego since Napoleon." Groves is a West Point graduate, pragmatic, driven, conservative, overweight, with 2-pound boxes of chocolate always stashed in his office safe. Oppenheimer weighs barely 128 pounds and dislikes fat people. He's graduated cum laude from Harvard in 3 years and is now a pie-in-the-sky theoretician. He reads Sanskrit for fun, and Oppenheimer admits that he's been a member of just about every Communist Front organization on the West Coast, end quote. Among his many communist friends and relations are his brother, his wife, and his mistress. Yet he displays keen insight into the methods for organizing such a huge research effort. Groves is at last persuaded that J. Robert Oppenheimer is the man for the job. But Army opposition to the appointment of a communist sympathizer is stiff. Finally, Groves has to give a direct order to the security office for them to issue Oppenheimer's clearance. In late 1942, the two men start searching for an isolated place to build the top-secret research laboratory. Oppenheimer recalls a boys' school located on the New Mexican mesa where he vacationed since his youth. Within days, the Corps of Engineers buys the Los Alamos Ranch School and begins throwing up barracks around the old school's main lodge. The task facing the scientists arriving at the new lab is immense. For starters, no one knows which will make a better bomb, uranium-235 or plutonium. Neither substance has ever been produced in quantities visible to the naked eye. Now, dozens of pounds will be needed. At great expense, complete industrial cities to manufacture both substances are constructed practically overnight. At Hanford in Washington State, a factory is quickly erected to manufacture plutonium. The metal is highly toxic, but easier to produce than uranium-235. Unfortunately, no one is completely sure how to make it into a bomb. U-235, on the other hand, is almost sure to make a good nuclear explosive. Its problem is that it is incredibly difficult to separate from uranium ore. So an enormous uranium-235 plant is built at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Because no one knows which separation method will work best, 3 complete factories must be built. Oak Ridge costs $500 million to build. Security at all the atomic cities is some of the most rigid in the entire war effort. Groves insists that information be shared only on a need-to-know basis. Workers at Oak Ridge and Hanford have no idea what they are making, or if they are making anything, since tons of material come in and nothing seems to come out. Groves' mania for secrecy reaches its zenith at the Los Alamos lab. Scientists must refer to each other with cryptic code names. Mr. Farmer, Mr. Wagner. And the bomb is never a bomb. It's the gadget, or the gimmick, or the beast. Scientists might relax together at tennis or skiing, but stiff restrictions are placed on what colleagues can reveal to each other about their work. They can say nothing at all to their wives and children. Communications with the outside world are virtually nil. Mail and phone calls are censored. Outside trips are permitted only with special permission. When they do travel, the scientists are shadowed by security agents.
For living quarters, there were for civilian workers, there were not barracks, but apartment buildings. They were fairly nice rooms. They were equipped with a single bed, with a table, chairs, dressers, things like that. Sort of a not fancy equipment, but very, very adequate.
Life at Los Alamos is comfortable but confined. Once a scientist's family has moved to the lab, they cannot leave. Babies are born without their aunts and uncles knowing their whereabouts. Contact with the outside world is cut off. While the Los Alamos scientists are most concerned about the Nazis getting the bomb first, Groves and his men know that the real threat to security is from the Soviets. And despite the iron veil of secrecy drawn around the laboratory, the Russians indeed know volumes about what goes on there. And why not? Their spy at Los Alamos is Dr. Klaus Fuchs, a star in the lab's theoretical division. By the end of 1942, the Manhattan Project is fully underway. Its scientists begin to make immediate progress towards the creation of an atom bomb. And Enrico Fermi has demonstrated the first controlled nuclear chain reaction in an atomic pile built beneath the squash courts at the University of Chicago. But one problem looms. At the moment, no airplane in the Allied inventory is capable of delivering such a weapon to the Japanese mainland. By early 1944, factories across the country are gearing up to produce thousands of copies of a revolutionary new aircraft. It will become central to the Allied plans for the defeat of Japan and crucial to America's ability to deliver the atomic bomb once it has been completed. It is the Boeing Airplane Company's B-29. Officially named the Super Fortress, the plane is a gigantic leap forward, 25% faster than its predecessor, the B-17. Air Force planners predict that a force of only 600 B-29s can disable the Japanese war machine. Its pressurized cabin permits the crew to work in comfort at altitudes up to 36,000 feet above Japanese flak or fighters. It can carry a 20,000-pound bomb load and fly more than 4,000 miles. But greatly extended bomber range isn't the only ingredient necessary to dropping an atomic bomb on a strategic Japanese target. The U.S. Marines stormed the island of Saipan in June 1944. It's the first step in the American plan to recapture the Mariana Island Group, mainly to provide an airbase close enough to permit the B-29 bombing of Japan's industrial centers. Japanese resistance on Saipan is ferocious. American casualties number more than 16,000. 24,000 Japanese soldiers die. And in a gruesome coda, when all is lost, more than 8,000 Japanese civilians commit suicide by throwing themselves off a cliff into the sea. Once Saipan is secure, the Marines use it as a base to attack Tinian, the next major island in the Mariana chain. Then, finally, Guam. Marine and Army troops fight their way ashore against fierce opposition. Japanese troops counterattack and sneak through the American lines. In the rear, cooks, clerks, even hospital patients fight off the infiltrators. At the front lines, Americans emplace howitzers only 35 yards behind the infantry to fire point blank at the Japanese. One observer reports, arms and legs flew like snow. Finally, on August 10th, the Marines declare the Marianas secure. America now has an airbase, placing the Japanese home islands well within the reach of the B-29 superfortress. August 1944. As mop-up operations in the Marianas begin, a 29-year-old Air Force colonel is scouring U.S. air bases, hand-picking the right men for his new high-security outfit. The colonel is a pipe-smoking former medical student from Miami named Paul Tibbets. His unit will eventually move to the Marianas in order to drop its special weapon. But until the new B-29 airfields there are built, Tibbets' crew will train at an isolated airfield on the Utah-Nevada line called Wendover Field. Tibbets' 509th is the Air Force's first composite group. With its own transport maintenance and other support squadrons, the 509th is the only completely self-contained unit in the Air Force. Members of the 509th begin arriving at Wendover Field in September of 1944. It had previously been used as a training base for various planes. The drinking water tastes bad, there are rats, sand permeates everything, and Wendover is so dreary that Bob Hope calls it leftover field when he comes through on a USO tour.
Oh, I have to describe Wendover as desolate. I think we passed our last tree 100 miles before we got to the base. And when you looked at the salt flats, it looked like you were looking into nothing. And the barracks were kind of run down.
Fortunately, the members of the 509th are not confined to the Utah desert for the duration of their training. Crews periodically fly down to Batista Field in Cuba for training in overwater navigation. and considerable time and effort is spent dropping test bombs at weapon ranges in the Southern California desert. These test drops are intended mainly to help the Los Alamos lab refine the casing designs for the two different bombs that they are developing. One bomb will use the uranium-235 being extracted in Tennessee. This long, thin bomb, nicknamed Thin Man, uses conventional explosives to fire a uranium bullet in the tail down a gun barrel into a uranium target at the nose. The two pieces smash together, forming the minimum critical mass necessary to trigger a nuclear chain reaction. Later advances in the bomb's physics will permit designers to shorten Thin Man from 17 feet to 9 and to change its name to Little Boy. But physicists calculate that this design will not work with plutonium. They figure the plutonium would reach critical mass before the bullet reaches the target, blowing the bomb apart in a gigantic fizzle. The scientists in New Mexico begin experimenting with high explosives as a precision tool. They hope to implode a hollow sphere of plutonium into a smaller, solid ball of critical mass. Despite disappointing early trials, a bomb is designed around the planned plutonium sphere. For obvious reasons, it's nicknamed Fat Man.
The design of the Fat Man bomb was really pretty difficult to do. Somehow you had to make this into a ballistic shape that would produce reproducible flight, and from which you could get your ballistic table information to work on your bomb sight. And so it's almost like a streamlined brick. It's one of the worst things you can have.
Test bombs resembling Fat Man are called pumpkins. They're loaded with conventional explosives and drop tested in the California desert. Early models tumble badly and miss the target by miles. Finally, a new design with a box-shaped tail is tried. It works, to the surprise of the cameraman on the ground.
A man named Bruxner, he was, for some reason, unable to leave the whole bombing range at the time that we were scheduled to come over. So he said, well, they've been missing by so much that the safest place would be the bullseye of the target. So that's where he went, and this bomb came down and was headed right towards the bullseye. So fortunately, he had time, he could spot it and had time to scramble out of the way.
The training flights are unlike anything the men of the 509th have ever experienced, dropping only one 10,000-pound bomb and then immediately pulling into a dizzying 158-degree steep dive turn. The peel-away is designed to put the maximum possible distance between the bomber and the nuclear explosion. But only two people in the 509th know this: Tibbets himself and Major Charles Sweeney, commander of the group's bomber squadron. No one else in the outfit is told the true nature of the weapon they will deliver. Not even Tibbets' co-pilot, Captain Robert Lewis. In February of 1945, Commander Fred Ashworth is sent by General Groves to find a new home for the 509th Composite Group somewhere in the Mariana Islands. Guam has the better port facilities, but Ashworth picks Tinian, where construction is just finished on the largest airfield in the world at the north end of the island. Tinian is also closer to Japan than Guam, and smaller as well, making it better for a top-secret operation.
So I went up to see the island commander, Air Force General by the name of Kimball, and I told him who I was, and I was a commander at the time, and he looked at me a little skeptical, and I said, I need to do a survey here for silver plate. Oh, silver plate. Well, it turned out silver plate was the Army's code word that defined not necessarily the Manhattan Project, but a project that had absolute top priority throughout the entire Air Force. And so just as soon as I said silver plate, he said, where would you like to go?
At that moment, 500 miles to the north, American Marines are beginning an assault on the Japanese-held island of Iwo Jima. Delays have given the Japanese time to dig in, and despite tremendous advance bombardment, the invasion is as bloody as any of the war. 5,400 Americans are killed, 23,000 are wounded. 20,000 Japanese die in the battle, a staggering 90% of their force on the island. But at last, America has the forward air base it needs, a place where B-29s en route from the Marianas can make their distressingly common emergency landings. Back in the States, 509th Air Crews have been traveling to the B-29 factory in Omaha, where Martin makes the Superfortress under license from Boeing. 15 B-29s have been specially modified for the 509th. In order to maximize speed and altitude, all the armament is stripped out except for the tail guns. The special Superfortresses also have the latest improvements: electric reversible pitch propellers and pneumatic fast open bomb bay doors. The 509th crews pick up the planes at the factory, sign for their $1 million value, and fly them back to Wendover as their very own planes. Back in Utah, the men of the 509th are growing restless. Their weekends in Salt Lake get rowdier. Now, at last, their new home on Tinian is prepared, and the men are ready to establish the base of operations for a mission unique in military history. It's April 12, 1945, and the 509th Composite Group is packing up for the long trip to the Eastern Pacific. The scientists at Los Alamos have finally produced symmetrical implosions using high explosives. And now word comes from Warm Springs, Georgia, that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt has died of a massive cerebral hemorrhage. At Los Alamos, Robert Oppenheimer speaks at a memorial service for America's fallen leader. He quotes Hindu scripture from the Bhagavad Gita. Man is a creature whose substance is faith. What his faith is, he is. Oppenheimer continues, the faith of Roosevelt is one that is shared by millions of men and women. And for this reason, we should dedicate ourselves to the hope that his good works will not have ended with his death. Stunned and grieving, the scientists soldier on with the plans to test the plutonium bomb. They're confident in the calculations that show the uranium little boy bomb will work. But because no one really knows if the Fat Man plutonium sphere will implode correctly, a test shot is arranged on the grounds of Alamogordo Air Force Base, 120 miles south of Los Alamos. The name of the place is Jornada del Muerto, the Journey of Death. The code name for the test is Trinity. The first step comes in May 1945. It's a dry run to test and calibrate instruments with radioactive slugs spiked in amongst 100 tons of high explosives, the largest chemical explosion ever deliberately set off. Next, the lab builds a 100-foot tower from which the plutonium sphere will be suspended, and receives a 200-ton steel safety capsule nicknamed Jumbo. Oppenheimer plans to use the capsule to contain the valuable plutonium in the event of a fizzle. But when he realizes that the capsule would become 200 tons of radioactive fallout in the event of a success, the $12 million plan is scrapped. In July, a nearby ranch house is commandeered as a clean room for the assembly of the bomb. Final assembly takes place in a small tent erected at the base of the tower. A hitch develops when the last segment sticks while being slid into place. The scientists hold their breath as Oppenheimer hovers until they realize that the segment is warmer than the rest of the sphere. When the temperatures equalize, the piece slides into place. But as the sphere is hoisted to the top of the tower, a much more serious problem looms on the horizon. The evening before the test, a violent thunderstorm builds and breaks over ground zero. Will a stray bolt of lightning set off the gadget? No one knows. In any event, the stormy conditions would surely spread radioactive fallout to populated areas. Postponement, however, is a poor option as President Truman waits anxiously at the Potsdam Conference for a positive result that he can lever against Stalin. The test must go on. Finally, the rain stops, the sky clears, and General Groves gives the go-ahead for the countdown. Tension at the command center is at a fever pitch as physicists take half-joking bets on whether the world's first atomic explosion will set fire to the atmosphere and wipe out life on Earth. Finally, the moment arrives. 5:29 a.m., July 16th, 1945. The sun rises in the west at Alamogordo Air Force Base. From every possible angle, movie cameras record a blast equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT. Trinity is heard more than 200 miles away. The flash is seen at a distance of 450 miles in Amarillo, Texas, and explained to the press as the explosion of an ammunition dump. Vannevar Bush shouts to General Groves over the roar that the bomb is brighter than a star. Bucking for another promotion, Groves points to his rank insignia and yells back, brighter than 2 stars. Trinity director Ken Bainbridge congratulates Oppenheimer, saying, "Now we're all sons of bitches." Oppenheimer himself is moved to recall lines from his beloved Hindu scripture. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the Mighty One. Now I am become death, the shatterer of worlds. America has won the race. It alone has the atomic bomb. Groves' good news is flashed by coded cable to Truman at Potsdam. The president tells Stalin of a new weapon, of unusual destructive force, but the Soviet premier is nonchalant. Unbeknownst to Truman and Churchill, Klaus Fuchs has been keeping the Russians up to date all along. Immediately after the explosion, Ground Zero can be safely approached only in a lead-lined tank. But within days, the radiation declines, and later Oppenheimer and Groves see with their own eyes the devastation. The tower has been vaporized down to its foundations. The ground is covered with glass, created by the furious heat of the blast. As physicists poke through the debris in the Jornada del Muerto Valley, the focus of the Manhattan Project begins to shift to the other side of the world. The end of the Trinity countdown marks the beginning of a countdown for the Japanese Empire. Compared to the arid isolation at Wendover, Tinian Island is practically a paradise for the men of the 509th Composite Group. After a brief stint in tents, the 509th moves into the comparatively luxurious digs left behind by the Navy Construction Battalion that built North Field.
We had a really nice area. As I remember, the CBs had built that area for themselves, and then they took it away from them, gave it to us, and it had nice sidewalks and Quonset huts and office buildings and outdoor theater. And I think we had much better quarters than anybody else on the field, as far as I know.
Our life was all right because we had a cook that could make, Australian goat taste all right.
There wasn't any refrigeration or that kind of stuff. So we had cold water all the time we were there for taking showers. But we did have good facilities compared to the way the other GIs would have it.
And the other GIs on the island noticed, too.
They had been over there for about 6 months before we arrived, and they had lost a lot of their crews through accidents and being shot down and equipment failure. And all of a sudden we come in with brand new airplanes and stripped down airplanes, and we were getting the best of treatment from the government, and there was a lot of resentment. Jealousy is more of a term that I would use.
Other squadrons on Tinian razz the 509th for the lightweight missions they've been flying. Other flyers lead the island by the thousands on huge, dangerous bombing runs to Japan. Some never return. For the 509th, training sorties consist of bombing virtually undefended nearby Japanese-held islands. On later combat missions, 509th crews fly the 3,000-mile round trip to Japan to drop just one bomb, a test pumpkin from 30,000 feet. One island poet puts the spite in verse. Into the air the secret rose, where they're going nobody knows. Don't ask us about the results or such, unless you want to get in Dutch. But take it from one who is sure of the score, the 509th is winning the war. July 26, 1945, 10 days after the Trinity test. The Allies, meeting in Berlin, announced the Potsdam Declaration. The Japanese must surrender unconditionally or face prompt and utter destruction. There is no mention of the planned means of such destruction. The Japanese cabinet decides to treat the Potsdam Ultimatum with silent contempt. Truman and his advisors see no choice but to go ahead with the atomic bombing of Japan. The only question left is where exactly. General Groves has the beautiful old historic Japanese capital of Kyoto at the top of his target list, mainly for the psychological effect its destruction would have. But War Secretary Henry Stimson opposes targeting Kyoto, also for psychological reasons. Stimson fears that destroying the religious and historical heart of Japan would push the Japanese into the arms of the Soviets after the war. President Truman agrees, and Kyoto is deleted from the final orders, which now lists the atomic targets in order of priority: Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata, and Nagasaki. On the same day the Allies issue the Potsdam Declaration, the USS heavy cruiser Indianapolis drops anchor in Tinian Harbor. It is carrying a 300-pound lead bucket welded to its deck. In the bucket, unbeknownst to the captain and the crew, is the uranium-235 core for the Little Boy bomb. The precious cargo is unloaded and the ship departs. 4 days later, a Japanese submarine torpedoes and sinks the Indianapolis. 3/4 of the crew die in the disaster, hundreds of them eaten by sharks. August 4th, A-Day -2. The crews for the first atomic mission gather in a Quonset hut briefing room on Tinian. Colonel Tibbets introduces Navy weaponeer William Deke Parsons, who announces that they will soon drop the most destructive weapon ever produced. Parsons has brought along a movie of the Trinity test.
And at that time, they had a projector there, film projector, and they had a roll of film. Unfortunately, they did not mesh. So instead of somebody showing us pictures were supposedly taken of the Trinity test, I believe it was Captain Parsons, gave us a visual description of the mushroom that we would see.
So all they did was take the pictures that they had in color and pass them around. And when they done that, it looked like the sun. Now, how are you going to describe to somebody, this is a bomb, this is what it looks like the sun?
Finally, after years of planning, research, and anticipation, after the expenditure of $2 billion, the day arrives. August 5th, 1945. Little Boy is carefully towed out of the air-conditioned bomb assembly hut. With most of the island brass in attendance, the bomb is loaded onto its trailer and towed to a special loading pit equipped with a hydraulic lift. Both Fat Man and Little Boy are too large to be loaded into even the giant B-29s conventionally. The pits are used to drop the bomb below the plane and then lift it into the bomb bay. As the bomb rises into the hold of Tibbetts' plane, number 82, Deke Parsons confides a fear to General Groves' assistant, Brigadier General Thomas Farrell. Parsons is worried about the cataclysmic consequences of a crash on takeoff. We could get a nuclear explosion and blow up half the island, Parsons says. General Groves has already scotched Parsons' proposal to arm the bomb after takeoff, too complex. But a series of recent crashes on Tinian has strengthened Parsons' hand. Farrell gives the go-ahead, and Parsons spends the next several hours practicing how to load the explosive charge for the uranium bullet, over and over again, till his hands bleed. With the unarmed bomb safely in the bomb bay, the plane taxis to its hard stand. On the tail, Colonel Tibbetts has replaced the arrow in a circle emblem of the 509th with the circle R, borne by many other planes on Tinian, just in case Japanese fighter planes get curious. And now Tibbetts puts his mind to another paint job, bestowing nose art on this plane which will go down in history. He decides to name 82 after his mother, Enola Gay, and authorizes a sign painter to cross the line of MPs guarding the plane. "2 a.m. Monday morning, August 6th. So many lights and cameras surround the now christened plane that it looks to Tibbetts like a Hollywood premiere. Deke Parsons thinks it looks more like a drugstore opening. The idea, of course, is General Groves. The departure must be preserved for posterity, not to mention publicity. The flight crew line up for this famous photo. Navigator Dutch Van Kirk, bombardier Thomas Farabee, Tibbetts, co-pilot Bob Lewis, and radar countermeasures operator Jacob Beezer. With a final, tired wave, Tibbetts bids farewell. At 2:45 a.m. Tinian time, Enola Gay trundles down the runway. With the bomb and extra fuel, she is 8 tons over normal gross takeoff weight. Tibbetts burns practically the entire 2-mile runway to build up takeoff speed, to the alarm of co-pilot Lewis. But at the last moment, Paul Tibbetts eases back on the yoke, and the Enola Gay edges skyward towards a dying but defiant empire. 3 a.m., the Enola Gay cruises through the darkness at low altitudes towards her rendezvous with the camera and instrument planes. Weaponeer Deke Parsons and his assistant Morris Jepson crawl into the bomb bay to insert the explosive charge into the bomb. In less than 30 minutes, the job is done, and Jepson replaces a green-painted plug jutting from Little Boy's side with a similar red plug.
When that green plug was in, the so-called firing system was isolated from the whole circuit. It was out of the system. And when you took that green plug out and put a red one in, that connected the firing system into the whole electronic system.
As dawn glows on the horizon, the 3 planes meet over Iwo Jima. The instrument plane, Great Artiste, has developed an oil leak. But pilot Chuck Sweeney decides it's not serious enough to abort his mission. At 6:45, the planes pressurize their cabins and begin their climb to the bombing altitude of 31,000 feet. A short time later, the Enola Gay takes a coded message from one of the weather planes ahead. Cloud cover less than 3/10 mile at all altitudes. Advice, bomb primary. Tibbetts announces, "It's Hiroshima." The all-clear sounds over the city of Hiroshima as the American weather plane departs. Factory workers return to their labors, and soldiers at 2nd Army headquarters retake the parade grounds. Life returns to normal. In Enola Gay's co-pilot seat, Bob Lewis has been keeping a journal of the mission's activities. As the Enola Gay nears Hiroshima, Lewis writes, "There will be a short intermission while we bomb our target. 8:11 a.m., Bombardier Tom Farabee throws aside his baseball cap and adjusts his Norden bomb sight. Colonel Tibbets switches control of the plane to Farabee, who sights his aiming point, the main T-shaped bridge over the Ota River. Seconds later, Farabee switches on the radio tone, alerting all the planes that the drop is imminent. Farabee's finger hovers over the manual drop switch, but the automatic system works perfectly. At 17 seconds past 8:15 a.m., Little Boy plummets out of Enola Gay's bomb bay, abruptly cutting the drop tone. Tibbets shears his plane into the well-practiced 158-degree diving turn. The crew pull on their Army-issue welder's goggles to shield their eyes from the flash, but Tibbets finds that he cannot see his flight controls and he rips the goggles off his face. Exactly 43 seconds after the drop, 1,850 feet above the ground, the first atomic weapon of war explodes. The time is precisely 8:16 a.m., Monday, August 6th, 1945. Moments later, the two shock waves from the blast catch up with the planes. The lurch prompts Tibbets involuntarily to yell, "Flak!" The camera plane has circled around behind Enola Gay and Great Artiste to capture the blast as it happens.
The other two airplanes, after they dropped the bomb, they made a turn. So when the bomb exploded, they were actually, their tail was towards it. They couldn't see it. But we went directly into it. And so it exploded right in front of our airplane. So we could see the explosion, the whole thing as they went out from the heat that moved out, and then as the ball started and moved in, it rose up and sucked everything back in. And as it got different altitudes, it was turning red and yellow and purple and all. So just boiling on like inside.
Unfortunately, none of the film taken from the photoplane turns out. This rare footage, shot handheld from the instrument plane, is the only film of the Hiroshima atomic cloud known to exist. As the planes circle Hiroshima for a better look at the boiling, turbulent inferno below, co-pilot Robert Lewis adds one more entry to his journal. "My God," he writes, "what have we done?" On the ground, the smoke begins to clear over the city of Hiroshima. This captured Japanese footage shows the city in the hours and days after the bombing. The film will remain classified for 25 years after the war. The power of the blast is immense, equivalent to 13,500 tons of high explosive. The temperature at its center momentarily reaches 100 million degrees. Temperatures on the ground of 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit melt tile and granite for a distance of 3/4 of a mile around ground zero. Shadows are permanently burned into the surfaces behind. Nearby pedestrians are vaporized where they stand at the moment of detonation, leaving behind a shadow etched into the concrete. The blast wave rockets outward from the hypocenter at 1,100 feet per second, the speed of sound. Within a mile, only buildings of reinforced concrete remain standing, though shattered. Everything else is reduced to rubble. The Commercial and Industrial Exhibits Building. The Hiroshima Gas Company Building. Ancient Hiroshima Castle. 2nd Army Headquarters. And Farabi's aiming point, the T-shaped Aioi Bridge, severely damaged, but somehow still standing. Further out, the damage is dominated by fire, lit by the bomb itself and by the many charcoal stoves tipped over by the force of the blast. But the few uninjured firefighters available are helpless to combat the blazes. The city's water mains are shattered in 70,000 places. More than 90% of all the buildings in the city are damaged or destroyed. Almost 2/3 have been totally demolished. But those who survived the initial blast are less concerned with the damage to their city than they are with fleeing to safety and finding treatment for their injuries. 9/10 of the doctors and nurses in the city have been killed or disabled. The few standing hospitals and clinics are completely overwhelmed by armies of the wounded flowing into the hallways and down staircases. In addition to injuries from flying objects, many patients suffer severe burns where the bomb's heat flashed upon their skin. Where the skin was protected by an object or by clothing, or merely by the pattern of a dress, it was spared. A German Jesuit missionary teaching at a seminary 4 miles from Ground Zero describes the aftermath in an interview conducted weeks later.
After a while, we saw a procession of people coming from the outskirts of the city up the valley. Many of them, most of them, were wounded, especially the parts of the body which were not covered by clothes, like hands, feet, back. They came up to our house, and we did what we could, but there were no possibility to give much of aid. As a matter of fact, we used all our grease we had at that wartime in the house, and it was exhausted in a moment.
Within a few days, the first signs of radiation sickness will begin appearing among those closest to Ground Zero. Their gruesome deaths from massive infection and hemorrhage will follow within 2 weeks. The total number of casualties will never be known precisely, but at least 70,000 Japanese die instantly in the blast. Another 30,000 or more will die from their injuries or radiation sickness in the coming days and weeks. And atomic warfare against the Empire of Japan is not over yet. At 3 o'clock on the afternoon of August 6th, Enola Gay finally returns home to Tinian Island. The elapsed time of the mission is 12 hours, 15 minutes. Word of the first atomic mission has spread like wildfire across the island.
We were waiting desperately to know the results.
There was a feeling of astonishment, certainly, and, well, exhilaration, I'm sure. I said, my gosh, he wasn't kidding.
We were surprised. I mean, surprised was one of the big emotions. The other was the feeling that the war should probably be over in a relatively short time.
Going through my mind, he would kill a lot of people at the same time. But that was about all, you know, except that, well, we were glad that we had that bomb and not somebody else.
The official party lined up to greet the returning men of the Enola Gay has more brass than a candlestick factory, including General Carl Spaatz, the new commander of the Strategic Air Force. Paul Tibbets is called to attention to receive a DSC, the Distinguished Service Cross.
He was out smoking a pipe, and he didn't naturally, a military man doesn't take a pipe and smoke it while they're calling him to order, and he stuffs the pipe in his flying suit sleeve, and the general came over, and they think they gave him the DFC right on the spot.
After backslapping congratulations from the 200 men crowded under the Enola Gay's wings, the men of the mission are whisked away into the officers' club for debriefing. Each man gets a shot of bourbon and a glass of lemonade for refreshment. It's a lucky break, since the interrogation drags on so long that by the time they join a beer party in their honor, all of the beer has been drunk. General Farrell slips out of the interrogation to cable a complete report of the mission to General Groves at his office in Washington. Farrell passes along the description of the mushroom cloud and the fact that reconnaissance photos taken so far have been useless due to the smoke and dust kicked up by the bomb. Groves is thrilled and notes there has never been a surprise to equal it since the Trojan horse. Groves issues a release to the White House press corps on behalf of President Truman, who is still at sea returning from Potsdam. Upon his return, Truman repeats for newsreel cameras the announcement of a new and terrible weapon.
If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
Of course, the Japanese do not surrender immediately, even after the August 8th declaration of war against them by the Soviet Union. General Groves wants a 1-2 punch to maximize the psychological effect against the Japanese. He orders the second bomb to be dropped as soon as possible. August 9th. Fat Man is wheeled out of the bomb assembly hut in preparation for its delivery to the new primary target of Kokura Arsenal. The Fat Man bomb has more cracks and gaps in its casing than Little Boy and must be sealed to protect the barometric switches that arm the bomb as it descends to detonation altitude.
It was dropping from an altitude of like 30,000 feet where the pressure was very, very low, but as the bomb dropped, it picked up pressure through the manifold system until it achieved a pressure which let the system work. That was the reason for sealing all of the cracks around the bomb case on the Fat Man.
Once the pressure sensor switches on, the bomb is finally triggered by a radar system which detects the precise altitude for detonation. The last step for preparation of Fat Man's casing is a layer of personal graffiti. One of the messages scrawled in crayon salutes the lost men of the USS Indianapolis. The men of the 509th are justly proud that the flight of the Enola Gay went precisely to plan. But the second atomic mission will suffer every bit of bad luck that Enola Gay managed to avoid. Early plans call for the second bomb to be dropped on August 11th. But when forecasters call for bad weather that day and the following 5 days, the drop is moved up to the 9th. This leaves barely enough time to prepare the bomb, and not at all enough time to prepare Chuck Sweeney's regular plane to drop the bomb. Instead, the great artiste will carry the same measuring instruments that had worked reliably on the Hiroshima mission, and Sweeney will commandeer plane number 77, Boxcar.
The bomb-carrying plane, then, was the plane that my crew regularly flew, was the plane that we had picked up at the factory in Omaha and flown to Wendover and had been our, quotes, airplane ever since it had left the factory. So that this plane, which was named the Boxcar, was flown by Major Sweeney and his crew and carried the Fat Man bomb on this mission.
Lightning flashes as Fat Man is hoisted into the Boxcar's bomb bay. Despite the advanced schedule, this mission will still have to cope with bad weather.
The night we were getting ready to go out to Nagasaki, There was thunderstorms in the area, lightning all over the place. And you get a little skitterish about lightning. That's bad news from the airplane business.
Now another problem. Shortly before takeoff, Sweeney discovers the switch for his 600-gallon reserve fuel supply is inoperative.
Tibbets told Sweeney that, well, you didn't have to worry about it because that 600 gallons was supposed to be a ballast for the bomb that was in the front bomb bay. Well, you can go ahead with the mission and get it over with, and that's not going to be a problem. But that's not the way it turned out to be.
Because of Fat Man's complex implosion system, it is impossible to assemble the bomb in flight. It'll be fully armed at takeoff.
There's no way to remove any powder charges or anything like that because the explosive is all built in and it's all contained in the bomb itself.
Chief Scientist Norman Ramsey, seen here at the far left, is so concerned about a nuclear accident that he orders every fire truck on the island to line the end of the runway and plants himself there as well. In the event of a disaster, he figures he'll be blown up too and won't have to do any explaining. But Sweeney and crew get off without incident at 3:49 a.m. and fly straight into the teeth of a summer storm.
In a lot of flying that I had done, even commercially now, I had never flown through a storm as bad as that because you would rock with it. You go up and down, this and that.
The weather forces Sweeney to move his rendezvous with the camera and instrument planes from Iwo Jima to Yakushima Island, 800 miles away. Sweeney and Bach meet up immediately, then wait around endlessly for the camera plane, long enough for antsy crew members to start seeing things.
I tell you, when you're flying in somebody else's homeland or around somebody else's homeland, your enemy, your mind is running wild. And when I see your mind is running wild, you look out that window, and the first thing you want to see are fighters. You don't want to see them, but if you do, you want to make sure. And you're looking. After a while, you're seeing dots in the sky because your heart is pumping.
The third airplane never showed up. And I'll leave it to the Air Force people to determine what happened to him. I gather he got lost. I don't know.
Finally, after burning 45 minutes worth of precious fuel, Sweeney and weaponeer Fred Ashworth decide to proceed to their target without the camera plane. More bad news when they arrive at the primary target, Kokura Arsenal. It's socked in under heavy ground haze, and Boxcar is under strict orders to bomb only if they can actually see the target.
General Groves wanted to be sure that we knew exactly where we were putting it. This is the kind of thing you just can't take a chance that it's going to go in anybody's backyard. So, and the radar bombing equipment is notoriously inaccurate.
Boxcar circles Kokura for another 45 minutes, trying 3 different approaches and hoping for a break in the cloud cover. It never comes.
These maneuvers, been a lot of criticism about that. But of course, Monday morning quarterbacking is real simple.
Finally, the Japanese begin sending up fighter planes and shooting anti-aircraft fire. Sweeney and Ashworth have had enough and mutually decide to move on to the secondary target, Nagasaki.
As you're going in, now you're either a little braver or you can't get any more scared. Whether the two, I don't know.
Unfortunately, the weather is hardly better at Nagasaki, and the fuel situation is now becoming desperate. Ashworth knows they must drop the bomb to be light enough to make it home. There's no choice. He authorizes Bombardier Kermit Behan to make a radar drop.
90% of the bomb run was radar, but about a minute, 45 seconds before the end of the radar run, Behan in the nose hollered, "I can see it, I can see it, I've got it." So immediately the radar run was stopped, and he took over and set up the bomb site and dropped the bomb.
Fat Man explodes at 11:02 a.m., August 9th, 1945. It is Bombardier Kermit Behan's 27th birthday.
And the fact that Behan was able to keep his cool and bomb as well as he did, I think is a remarkable accomplishment. And we'd gotten ourselves into a mess with a court-martial and a lot of other things of why things went so wrong. So Behan saved our skin, as far as I'm concerned. Great guy.
But celebration of the successful drop is short-lived. The two planes suffer a harrowing near miss of the burgeoning mushroom cloud and then turn for Okinawa, a 2-hour trip with just 2 hours fuel. The nearest friendly airfield may not be near enough.
Well, I think we were all concerned about the gasoline, because that was our big problem confronting us. And we were wondering if we were going to make it to the field.
Boxcar and the great artiste finally do make it to Okinawa, but the jinx still holds. Sweeney declares a mayday, but is, for some reason, unable to raise the control tower on the radio.
And we tried 2 or 3 times and we got no answer. So finally, Sweeney said to me, he says, Fred, he says, fire all the flares. He said, we're going to go in.
Co-pilot Fred O'Leary first fires the proper emergency landing flare and then every other flare on the plane. There's still no response. Sweeney decides to land anyway. Calling on all of his skills, Sweeney touches down unannounced and barrels through the active traffic pattern at 150 miles per hour, barely avoiding a couple of parked B-24s.
Until we got to the first taxi strip that got off the active runway. And as we turned off that strip, our number 2 engine quit. I recall it was number 2. And that's how close we were to running out of gasoline and having another problem if we hadn't been on the ground.
As for the bomb itself, reconnaissance surveys show Boxcar's luck had remained poor. Fat Man had detonated 3 miles upriver from its target, in a valley that sheltered much of the city from the impact of the blast. The affected area is more industrial than residential. Though Fat Man's 22,000-ton explosive yield is nearly twice that of the Hiroshima bomb, damage is confined by the hilly terrain, and casualties are fewer. 60,000 or so deaths. Unintended, perhaps, but a blessing as well. Two atomic bombs in the Soviet declaration of war have finally persuaded the Japanese cabinet to pursue surrender. They accept the Potsdam ultimatum with the understanding that the emperor will remain in power. In Washington, President Truman is under pressure to negotiate the harshest possible surrender terms with Japan. But War Secretary Stimson points out that the emperor is the only source of authority with the power to order all the Japanese armies to cease fighting. Finally, a compromise is struck. The emperor may stay in power, subject to the authority of the Allied occupation commander. On August 15th, for the first time ever, the emperor speaks on radio to his people, announcing capitulation. Americans throng the streets, celebrating the long-awaited VJ Day. The revelry runs long into the night. September 2nd, 1945, aboard the battleship Missouri at anchor in Tokyo Harbor, General Douglas MacArthur accepts the Japanese surrender. World War II, at last, is over. Half a century has passed since the week that changed the world. America has preserved many of the places and the tools of the Manhattan Project as reminders of the power and the price paid to end a war. The B-29 Enola Gay has been restored by the Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum. Enola Gay's renewal to factory condition memorializes the American industrial might that built her in the first place. Thousands of unsung men and women in shops across the country who assembled the planes, the tanks, and ships which finally overwhelmed the Axis powers. Los Alamos is still a working national laboratory, exploring not only nuclear physics, but also cures for cancer, AIDS, and breaching other scientific frontiers. Los Alamos is a reminder of the American intellect and ingenuity which unlocked the secrets of the atomic nucleus. Scientists and engineers who fought the war locked in secret laboratories, scribbling arcane calculations on their blackboards. Boxcar has been meticulously restored by the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, where it is on public display. Its interior was used for the recreations seen in this program. Boxcar and its harrowing flight represents the courage and tenacity of the men who built and delivered the first atomic bombs. And finally, Trinity, site of the first atomic explosion, now a part of the White Sands Missile Range in southern New Mexico. The preserved area includes Campagna Hill, where many of the physicists watched the test. The McDonald Ranch House, where the bomb was assembled. And a stone obelisk marking the spot where the test tower stood until it was vaporized in the blast. Trinity Site symbolizes mankind's awe in the face of forces which we have released but cannot entirely control. Taken together, these instruments of the Manhattan Project might be said to embody our continuing ambivalence about the dawn of the atomic age. History has yet to render a final verdict on the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But as we balance the morality of mass destruction against a 50-year era of comparative global peace, we can gaze upon this monument and consider the moment that the world changed.
Right. This is Captain William Sterling Parsons, United States Navy, of Fort Sumner, New Mexico. Captain Parsons made the original trip with the atomic bomb ship Enola Gay as weaponeer.
After a photographing session that made us feel like a Hollywood premiere, we got off at about 3 o'clock in the morning in darkness.
This is Major Tom Fairby of Marksville, North Carolina, bombardier of the first atomic bomber.
I could clearly see the city of Hiroshima within my bomb sight. Then I clutched in and took the run, and I felt the bump of the airplane. I was greatly relieved because I knew the unit had gone from the airplane that we had successfully delivered.
This is Colonel Paul Tibbets of Miami, Florida, commander of the Atomic Bomb Group.
The sight that greeted our eyes was quite beyond what we had expected, because we saw this cloud of boiling dust and debris below us with this tremendous mushroom on top. Beneath that was hidden the ruins of the city of Hiroshima.
Right.